In this section, we will talk about the addition of real numbers, more specifically, decimals and rational numbers. As an example, let's take 6.1 plus negative 2.3. Because our signs are opposites, we will take the larger number 6.1 and subtract from it the smaller number 2.3. This will give you 3.8 as a result. To determine whether 3.8 is positive or negative, let's look at the number with the larger absolute value, which is 6.1. Since 6.1 is positive and it has a larger absolute value, the answer will also be positive. The next example, we are adding two rational numbers, 3 over 10 plus negative 5 over 6. When adding two rational numbers, we have to make sure we have the lowest common denominator. If you don't have a common denominator, we need to find out what the lowest common denominator is. The lowest common denominator is the lowest number that 10 and 6 can both go into. So, for example, if we take the multiples of 10, we have 10, 20, 30, 40, etc., etc. Multiples of 6 are 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, etc., etc. Notice that the lowest number that 6 and 10 can both go into is 30, which means our lowest common denominator will be 30. Next, we will take each fraction and rewrite it with a denominator of 30. So, our fractions are 3 over 10 plus negative 5 over 6. To write this as a rational expression with a denominator of 30, we will multiply the 10 by 3. And if you multiply the denominator by 3, the numerator also must be multiplied by 3. Notice that 3 over 3 is the same thing as multiplying by a factor of 1, which does not change the value of 3 over 10. Same thing with negative 5 over 6. To rewrite negative 5 over 6 with a denominator of 30, we would multiply the 6 by 5. And if you multiply the denominator by 5, we must multiply the numerator by the exact same thing. So now we have 3 times 3, which is 9 over 30, plus negative 5 times 5, which is negative 25 over 30. Once we have a common denominator, we keep the denominator, and we will add the numerators, which are 9 and negative 25. Because these numbers have opposite signs, we will subtract the number with the larger absolute value and the number with the smaller absolute value. So 25 minus 9 is 16. But since 25 is negative, our answer will be negative 16 over 30. Any fraction needs to be in simplest form. So let's find the largest number that can divide both 16 and 30, which is 2. So we would divide both the numerator and denominator by 2, and our final answer would be negative 8 over 15. Let's look at another example. We have negative 1 over 8 plus negative 3 over 4. Since we do not have a common denominator, we need to find what the lowest common denominator is. The lowest number that 8 and 4 can both go into is 8. So we will take negative 1 over 8 plus negative 3 over 4 and write them using a denominator of 8. To rewrite negative 1 over 8 as a denominator of 8, we don't have to change anything because we already have a denominator of 8. To rewrite negative 3/4 with the denominator of 8, you would multiply the 4 by 2, which means you would also have to multiply the numerator by 2. Negative 3 times 2 is negative 6 over 8. Negative 1 over 8 plus negative 6 over 8 is negative 7 over 8. One more example. Let's add negative 3 over 6, or negative 3 over 4 plus 5 over 6. Between 4 and 6, the lowest common denominator is 12, which means we want to rewrite both negative 3 over 4 and 5 over 6 with a denominator of 12. So for the first fraction, to rewrite negative 3/4 using a denominator 12, we would multiply the 4 by 3, and if you multiply the denominator by 3, the numerator also has to get multiplied by 3. With 5 over 6, to rewrite 5 over 6 with the denominator of 12, we would multiply the 6 by 2, which means you would multiply the 5 by 2 as well. Negative 3 times 3 will give us negative 9 over 12. 5 times 2 will give us 10 over 12. Once we have a common denominator, all we do is we add the numerators, negative 9 plus 10, which will give us an answer of positive 1 over 12. Since this is in simplest form, we do not have to reduce it.